What's up, everybody? Welcome back to It's Not a Midlife Crisis. I'm Mid-Crisis Mama, and this is another episode of Tuesday Talks. Today's video is probably going to be a little splotchy. I haven't really laid it out like I tried to do in the majority of my videos, but I'm trying to squeeze this in while kiddo's asleep back here in the back seat. So, my dad died this week, and let me just start this by saying I'm not grieving the loss of someone that I loved. He wasn't a good man. So I've had a very weird mix of emotions. My dad was a very violent, abusive man. I cried, as I think is just human nature. But it really was more of a sad anger. It really brought up more of a feeling of such a shame that someone has spent their whole life being so angry and miserable and making other people's lives miserable and abusing your family and stripping them of any sort of happiness for basically the majority of their life. When I was a child, I hated this man. I despised this man, and I didn't hate people. People who knew me back then, used to hear me say all the time that I didn't want him to die. I thought that was too easy. I wanted him to see the end of the earth. I wanted him to live forever. I wanted him to get back everything that he did to my family. And when I was 18 and I got saved, I did forgive him. I called him and told him I forgive him. I attempted to make amends, and he went off into the same thing that I had to let him go. If I was going to continue to forgive him, I had to let him go. So I let him go. He tried to drag me back down. And anyway, I forgave him for me. Because I had to let go of that hatred and that anger and resentment for how my life turned out and the things that he put my mother through and my brother and anyone he came into contact with. I think he was great at making enemies. But it brought back up all the memories. His passing brought back up all the memories of the things that he put us through. And while it didn't bring back up the type of rage that it used to bring up when I was younger, it definitely was a trigger. I think majority because my ex reminds me a lot of my dad, and I didn't see it at the time when I was with him. And when I got with my ex, I felt like he was a safe space. Come to find out, it was the opposite. But what I came to find out over the years was that he wasn't a safe space. He was a familiar space. And I didn't recognize it. I didn't recognize that he had those same characteristics as my dad. And I didn't realize that he was going to put me through a lot of what my dad put my mom through and my family. My dad did end up living a very miserable life with a lot of health issues, and lived much longer than most people expected him to live. He was bedridden for the last, I don't know, 10 years, just deteriorating at the VA. And without really having people by his side, his kids weren't there. I think my sister and I saw him a couple of times, and his brother was kind of there with him. I don't know. It just shows you that, you can get over trauma to the extent that you can move on with your life. You can live, but the reality is it stays with you. It stays with you. I talked to my mom, and when she got the news, she said basically the same thing that I went through. She couldn't sleep that night. She wasn't upset, like mourning the loss of somebody. Obviously been divorced for many years, but she couldn't sleep, just reminded of all the things that he had put us through. And it's just so tragic, like how different our lives could have been had he not been the way that he was. And had he been any kind of father or decent human being at all, I probably wouldn't have ended up in the relationship that I ended up in. Repeating history. And it scares me for, like, my stepdaughters, because I see me in them to the extent that they have no father figure. And the father that they had in their life abused their mother and put them through hell and abandoned them. And as women, young women, they are very susceptible to ending up in the same type of relationship with the same type of man as their father. And I pray that they don't. I pray that they are on guard enough that they avoid the smallest of red flags. That if anyone reminds them of their dad, even in the slightest bit, that they run. Because it is hard enough to get over childhood trauma. But to go from childhood trauma to ending up in the same type of position that your father put your mother through, it's like being stranded in the middle of the ocean. And there still is anger. There still is anger. There is. I hated that we endured what we endured as kids, and that my mom didn't take us out of that situation. And it wasn't until I got older that I realized she really couldn't. My dad was very violent, and I'm surprised we're here, to be honest. I'm surprised that he never took our lives. I'm surprised. I thank God we're here. But he absolutely could have and would have. And so many women end up with these men and ignore the red flags, and they don't make it out. And my mom made it out. And I made it out. So I'm not sad. I'm not sad that my dad is gone. But I'm reminded how much he took from us. And it makes me even more angry and more upset, because not just that, but how much I allowed the same as my mom, ending up with a man who you can't bring yourself to leave for whatever reason, and your children having to endure that. And that is my biggest life regret, is allowing my children to have the father that they have. Because when their dad dies, it's going to be the same thing. They're going to be reminded of everything that they could have had that they didn't, of the life that they deserved to have that they didn't. Because this man is never going to make it right. He's not a normal person. Normal human beings recognize their failures and they fix it. Narcissists don't. They don't care. Even when it comes to their own children, they're good at pretending. They're good at putting on a show for everybody else. And at the end of the day, they would rather die and take it to the grave than admit that they've done something wrong and to hold themselves accountable. And it's disgusting. Because they have no remorse, they don't care. It doesn't affect them in the least bit. And it's the victims, it's their children, it's their families, it's the people they're in a relationship with, it's the people that they've hurt that have to live life with no closure, no resolution to anything, to just ruin somebody's life and move on with yours like it's no big deal. And the thing is, I do believe that you reap what you sow. I do believe that the misery that my dad lived with the years leading up to his death, that he was paying the price for what he did. And it's hard because at the same time, I don't wish him hell. After all is said and done, I still wish him freedom on the other side. I don't know what things looked like leading up to the end. I do hope at some point that he made it right with God. After everything, that is still what I hope. But it is a tragic thought that the possibility is that he didn't. Because to do that, you have to have some sort of remorse. And I think if I'm sad of anything, I'm sad about that. I'm sad that my mom is still affected after all these years. I'm sad knowing that I'll likely still be affected by all these years, that our children will still be affected by this. And I don't know specifically what I can do or will do in the future, but I know that I have to do something. I have to do something for these women and these young girls. More has to be done to help women stay out of toxic relationships from the get-go, because one bad decision can be life-changing. This all is just a painful reminder, not just for me, but of how many other people are going through abusive situations, how many children are being raised in an abusive household. It's just heartbreaking. I guess I don't really know where else I was going with this video today. But, in case anyone was wondering, that's what's going on. I just want to say to anyone out there that is dealing with an abusive relationship, or maybe it's not seemingly abusive, but you've noticed some red flags, some things that have made you uncomfortable. Listen to me. The first time that he calls you outside your name, the first time that he cusses you out, the first time that he raises his voice to you, let that be the last time. Immediately no. Immediately no. Flaws you can deal with in a relationship, you work through them, okay? Flaws are things like chewing with your mouth open and leaving the toilet seat up. Red flags, absolutely not. Any kind of abuse. Any kind of abuse. It doesn't have to be physical abuse. Mental abuse, emotional abuse, okay? Any type of abuse needs to be a deal breaker. We have to stop spending so much time teaching women how to make their relationships work and teach women how to walk away faster. I'm sorry, and I'll save this for another video, but even in the church. You know how many lives have been taken in domestic violence from people who go to church all the time? No. No. No more. No more. Because even if you walk away with your life, you are going to be traumatized for life. Your children and your family are going to be traumatized for life. It's not something that goes away. It's something you can learn to live with, but it's not something that goes away. Your first red flag needs to be the last red flag. No more. Because the thing is, red flags don't travel alone. Where there's one, there's a dozen more waiting. Well, come back again to this topic when I'm in a little bit better state of mind and I can lay out what I actually want to talk about. You know, today was a lot of babbling, but for anyone going through it, you're not alone. And you don't have to make excuses for them. You don't have to live in silence. And there's help for you. Please, please find somebody to talk to. Please.
I'm down.
With that, I will see you all next time.